Africa Exim Bank, that I will refer to hereinafter as the Africa Exim Bank. Now, Mr. President, many of us in 2022 were here when Barbados had and played host to the very first Africa Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. We called it ACTIV anecdotally. It was held here in Barbados in 2022 at the LASC, and we had representatives from the CARICOM region and the Africa region come together over the course of several days for this trade and investment conference. In 2023, ACTIV moved from Barbados, and it was held then in Guyana in June. And Mr. President, in April of 2023 then, after the Barbados conference and even before the Guyana conference, the board of directors of the Africa Exim Bank made a decision. And they made a decision that was reflective of the spirit within which ACTIV itself was conceived and hosted. That decision was that they would have a memorandum of understanding between the two regions, between the CARICOM region and the African region, and that memorandum of understanding would serve to deepen, the relationships between the two regions. It would serve to deepen the relationship between the two regions. And as we deepen the relationship between the two regions, Mr. President, we would implement and give effect to a long sought after goal of closing the gap between the African region and the Caribbean region. Mr. President, it is no secret, and I've spoken about it before, that in a previous life, under the umbrella of the CARICOM Secretariat, I had the distinction of serving as a trade policy advisor to the East African region. In that capacity, Mr. President, I had the opportunity to participate in a series of negotiations. One, the creation of the East African Community Common Market, which I've spoken about before. I've spoken about it in this chamber where I said that when I arrived in Uganda to be based in Kampala, they were already deep in negotiations with the East African community on the creation of an East African Community Common Market. And lo and behold, to my excitement and subsequently my consternation, they were using the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to create it. They were using the Caribbean community's own instruments of our own regional integration movement to create an East African community and a common market. I was then able to see and participate in those negotiations for the launch of an East African Common Market, and then the consternation came when later I was able to see this region that modeled their common market after ours come and surpass the deepening of their regional integration movement in ways that we had talked about but had not in this region implemented. And so, Mr. President, the relationship then evolved beyond just the common market of the East Africa, but we then saw the conversations around the negotiation of an interim trade agreement between the African region of the East African region and that with West Africa as well, Mr. President, and then a South African sub-region and the European Union with interim economic partnership agreements, having already negotiated with the Caribbean in 2008 an economic partnership agreement. And then it went on, Mr. President. It was in that framing that the All Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement negotiations commenced. And the African continent at that time coalesced around itself in those discussions around how to deepen the trade and investment relationship among the 52 countries that were represented on the continent. How we as a region now, Mr. President, interface as CARICOM with those 52 member states perhaps could not be more important in this geopolitical context than ever before. And so, Mr. President, the relationship between the African continent and the Caribbean region has long been talked about. When we then in turn had an economic partnership agreement with Europe, Africa was negotiating in their sub-regional movements their own economic partnership agreements. The discussion around forging a deeper and a closer relationship with the CARICOM region also evolved. What would and should that relationship look like? To date, we have not signed a trade agreement with the African countries, and in the post-2008 period, there was an extensive debate around what we in the trade community call the spaghetti bowl of international trade agreements. Who are all these countries forging trade agreements with? What is contained within these trade agreements? Is it services? Is it goods? Is it investment? Is it financial services? Is it intellectual property? What does it look like? And we in the Caribbean region then did not and have not yet moved any further since the 2008 negotiation with the European Union, and then subsequently the UK Economic Partnership Agreement post-Brexit. We had that agreement. And so here came the African continent to say, look, we talked about this thing for a long time. We've been talking about deepening relationships for a long time. We don't have an agreement, but what are we going to do? And so ACTIV came about in 2012 as the first opportunity for the African continent to be here with Barbados and with CARICOM to begin to explore the modalities of what that would look like. What could it look like to forge that deeper relationship? It's fine to say that we established diplomatic relations, Mr. President, in what year, and that we've enjoyed long and cordial relationships over a number of years, Mr. President. It's fine to say that we are having an exchange of visits, and I remember being a young Foreign Service officer and having an official visit from places like Botswana come to Barbados and visit. And we've had the President of Kenya, they've come to visit, but what of it? What have we done at an institutional level to make and to give effect to the substantive relationships that political relationships have opened the doors for? What have been the economic, the commercial, the financial, the trade, the logistics, and the investment ties? What have we done? And so, Mr. President, there can be no question about it that the signature of a memorandum of understanding between the CARICOM region, 10 of the 15 member countries signed on to this memorandum of understanding and made a commitment to forging a technical relationship in the area of trade and investment, even without a trade agreement, Mr. President, even without it. That was done in 2023, Mr. President. And without wasting any further time, that was in April of 2023 when it was approved at the Board of Directors level, without wasting any further time, by August, the 4th of August, here in Barbados, we all witnessed, and it was publicly broadcast as well, between where its offices are located on the South Coast and then the Barbados Hilton, where the ceremony actually took place, the signature and the launch of the Barbados, of the CARICOM based in Barbados, Africa Exim Bank headquarters office. That began in 2023. Coming out of that launch in 2023 in August, Mr. President, the president of the Africa Exim Bank was here at the time, along with several leaders from across the region. And at the time they pledged to make available to this region, the 10 countries that had signed on to the MOU, 1.5 billion, with a B, in resources available to the CARICOM countries. $1.5 billion in a credit limit made available to finance projects in the Caribbean region. Projects that focus, Mr. President, specifically on things like trade infrastructure, investment in MSMEs, and sectoral projects in different countries. We've seen projects evolving in Guyana, we've seen projects evolving in Grenada. The intention stated at that time, Mr. President, was that within a few years, the expectation was that the $1.5 billion was meant to be increased to $3 billion over time. In February, now, fast forward, I'm showing the timeline, in February now of this year, just the other day, when the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting took place right here in Barbados again, the president of the Africa Exim Bank was here. And he announced that within the space of just a year and a half, the Africa Exim Bank had made the determination that they were going to reach $2.5 billion in trade, and investment credit limits for the CARICOM region, the countries that were vested here, Mr. President. And so there is no question at all, that the CARICOM region is now putting into implementation mode that which has been philosophically talked about for a really long time. For a really long time. And let it be clear also, Mr. President, that the Africa Export-Import Bank is not an entity that the government just randomly went and picked up and found somewhere and decided that we're going to go and tell the public that there's somebody that they're not, Mr. President. This is a bank that has been functioning for over 30 years. Over 30 years. It has assets that stand in excess of US 31 billion with a B. It has shareholder funds that amount to somewhere in the vicinity of 5.2 billion with a B. And it is making available to the CARICOM region up to $3 million in the initial investment with a B, Mr. President. This is the entity that has been set up, but I go a little bit further, Mr. President. When that first visit took place, not only did they offer what I have shared, but it was reciprocal. So Barbados and the CARICOM region have the option of taking advantage of the generous offer by the Africa Export-Import Bank in their offices in Cairo, in their offices in any other country, to house offices of the CARICOM region, where we would then in turn have officers not just from Barbados, but from the CARICOM region to be in a position to engage on the outbound side. So they are here, and the ambition is for us to also be there. That's what is intended. So what is expected then, Mr. President, for them to do with this portion of land? It is expected that on this portion of land, there will be the construction of a trade facility, which is equivalent to what they have done in every other jurisdiction where they have set up headquarters offices. Mr. President, this is not just a matter of coming to put up a building. It is about the commercial and the economic activity that comes as a consequence, the construction costs, local, the jobs that will be coming as a consequence of the construction, local. The creation, Mr. President, which is a long-held ambition across administrations, to the best of my knowledge, for Barbados to serve as a regional hub for international and regional organizations. That is not new either. So it is a little bit concerning that this thing is being turned into something, again, which it is not. Barbados and the Eastern Barbados is the home for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean of the Inter-American Development Bank. It is the home for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean of the European delegation. Barbados is the home and the hub for the entire region of UN House. Kofi Annan came here and opened it himself. Barbados is the home for the region, and we have heard in another contribution where Senator Nichols spoke about the circumstances under which the Caribbean Development Bank was given land to establish the headquarters that we see currently up in the Pine and Wilgie. Mr. President, the Caribbean Development Bank exists in Baobab Towers, Mr. President. As a matter of fact, don't let me go to Baobab Towers yet. In my own office for the Ministry of Energy, the government, under every headquarters agreement that it has in place, provides office space for offices that are headquartered here. It is a function of our diplomatic relationship with the rest of the world. Barbados does not stand in splendid isolation, someone said recently, and it is the truth. Especially when there are benefits to be derived to the country and to the people, and when it implements a long-standing philosophical position of successive governments for Barbados to forge closer, deeper, and more meaningful relationships with the African continent. And so, Mr. President, I don't want to belabor this particular resolution. I have placed it in context, not just where it is or what it is doing, who the bank is, what the philosophy is that has guided it, but also Barbados' standing relationships with headquarters agreements for international and regional organizations that make Barbados their home, and in so doing, add value to our economy and to our people, create jobs and create opportunities, but also give us a platform to implement the things that we as a country have long talked about. In this incarnation, Mr. President, it is a long sought after, long described, closer trade and investment relationship with the 52 member states of the African continent. And with these few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
Thank you, Senator Cummings. Senator Andre Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I rise to this vesting that we are here to do today. The government has placed us in this chamber in a rather peculiar situation, and not only us, but also all Barbadians, because throughout this country, we need to make two things clear. One, being against what the government is proposing now does not mean that you are against any further integration or association with our African brothers and sisters and their participation in this country. But the government has not given the people of Barbados sufficient information, and given the tone in this country, in particular the way how the land at Holetown, the Holetown Civic Center was handled, you could imagine that the people of Barbados, they are raw, the wounds are still raw in terms of the way how that was handled, and I do not understand why the government would force through at this time in terms of making this commitment when the people of Barbados have been asking for further explanation and information in terms of this arrangement that we are speaking about today. There was another version of this legislation being floated about. Now, you are asking for the people of Barbados to vest the land into a commercial bank, a profit-making bank. And I think that that is where Barbadians have an issue. Not at all with the bank being headquartered here, but also when you hear additional information from the government, it is not just the headquarters of the bank, but you hear that it would also be a trade center, which is what is listed in this legislation, in this resolution, a trade center. And then you also heard additional talk from the government that it would also be a hotel as well. I did not hear the leader of government business mention that, whether or not it was if a hotel would be there. But if that is the case, that is something that should have been mentioned in her introduction. And this is where majority of the Barbadians have issue with the process of vesting the land into the bank. We have no issue in terms of it having its commercial headquarters here. And you cannot necessarily compare what was done for the Caribbean Development Bank with what is being done with this bank. Because as I know, Barbados has representation on the board of the Caribbean Development Bank. The Caribbean Development Bank only does business with member states, of which Barbados is a member of that bank. You have a bank which is a commercial entity, a profit-making entity, which will be doing business, possibly, with other commercial entities, not just here in Barbados, but across the region. And Barbadians wonder, why did the government take the route of just vesting and passing on the heritage and the patrimony of Barbadians without any consideration of having an equity stake, if not in the area of the headquarters, but in the commercial part of it, which would be there, which would be the hotel, so that Barbadians would know in the future that you can continue to have some benefit from this arrangement. And this is not nothing foreign or anything that is strange. The original piece of legislation had the word lease in the legislation. So why now all of a sudden we have gone from the lease to the direct vesting, and then also in the legislation you mentioned at no cost? Now, where Barbadians have an issue is the no cost for a commercial entity. And even though Barbadians will benefit in any case from the jobs being created, well, we can't even have a guarantee that Barbadians will be involved in the construction, because as it is in Barbados to date, many of the construction projects do not employ Barbadians. So we don't have any guarantee that of the number of Barbadians who would actually benefit from jobs in the construction process. Has the government, in their arrangements and agreement with the bank, carved out some facility to guarantee that Barbadians will be involved in the construction process and be able to get jobs? Because we do know that all across Barbados, a number of construction projects are taking place, and the workers there are not Barbadians. So the average Barbadian does not have may not have an opportunity to benefit in that. And that will create some challenges in this country already as it is, where people are desperately looking for jobs and for opportunity, especially those in construction, and being denied that opportunity, or if they are given the opportunity, the level of pay which they're forced to accept, because the foreign workers accept the jobs at a lower pay than what Barbadians would ordinarily work for. This cannot necessarily be fair to Barbadians. And if I am wrong, and the government has been so thought ahead and made arrangements and guarantees that Barbadians will be the first to get jobs in the construction process, I'm at the disposal of the leader of government business to say that in her further contribution in this legislation. But the issue of the day, you have just pulled the wool over the eyes of Barbadians with the Whole Town Civic Center. You have just, and many Barbadians feel
Senator Worrell, I know that you cannot accuse honorable members of pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. You want to withdraw that and move on. If you disagree with what was said, you can say you disagree with what was said. But to really suggest the intention to engage in a fraudulent activity, even if it's only with information, is really not parliamentary. Let's withdraw and continue to make your point, please.
Mr. President, I will withdraw the statement. I will say it in a different way. Barbadians, by and large, feel deceived by this government in the way in which, by and large, feel deceived by this government in the way in which the Whole Town Civic Center matter was handled. And many of them believe that they should have had further say and discussion in the process. And when you were given the impression by a senior member in the cabinet that it was not a done deal, and Barbadians thought that they would have had an opportunity for some reversal of the decision, you then get a ministerial statement to the fact that the deal has already been closed, the property has already been sold. And this is what aggrieves many Barbadians. They feel as though the government did not take them into their confidence as they had promised. Transparency and accountability, and be upfront with the people of Barbados with what they're doing. And now we are here rushing through this debate, rushing in passing this legislation, because I understand that there are dates booked in the calendar already for that piece of land already. And the senator can say, but even if it is not said no, you can hide and buy land, but you can't hide and work it. And the people will definitely see when the groundbreaking ceremony takes place in a matter of days. I don't know if that's on parliamentary side, if you wish for me to withdraw that too, because I recognize that you have to be very politically correct with this government with what you are saying, because they cannot take the unvarnished truth.
Senator Worrell, there's nothing political about the governance of this Honorable Senate. The standing orders, I believe it is Standing Order 31, in terms of the content of speeches, says what you can and can't say. And these are the same standing orders, irrespective of which political party happens to have a majority. There's nothing political about the process of governance. I'm simply following the standing orders as they are standing orders. So don't go there.
Thank you, Mr. President. I continue. There are other means in which this vesting could have been done, and this process could have been done. There was the option of the lease. There was the option of the subdivision, and you do the headquarters and possibly do the vesting for the same headquarters, and you do something different for the hotel. What Barbadians are concerned about is, why is it that this government seems quite ready to sell every piece of land, or not, in this case, not sell, but to give away every piece of land in Barbados, especially those parcels of land close to the sea, because Barbadians have a natural affinity to the beach and want to be able to enjoy the beach and the views of the beach. And I do not understand what is the development plan of this government, but it will soon come at a time where it will be difficult for Barbadians to actually have a view of the ocean when you travel along the south coast and when you go along the west coast as well. I believe that this situation could have been done better, and I want the record to be clear. We are not opposed to working and building stronger relationship with our African counterparts. But we're not saying don't let them come in, but the way in which it is done could have been done better to safeguard the interests of Barbadians. And this government is showing no interest in safeguarding the interests of Barbadians. They seem not willing to take the time to explain to Barbadians, to speak to Barbadians, and be upfront with them with their dealings, their plans, and their operations. Now, I will also add into this debate as well, because we're dealing with a vesting. We also had the property which was taken from liquidation center through a compulsory acquisition by this government. And this is the way how it seems to be treating Barbadians. You are taking property by compulsory acquisition from locals, and up to this day, I don't believe that the owner of the property has been paid for that property, but I can see that work has already commenced in construction on that property. Those things should not be happening, and this government has a lot to answer for with the people of Barbados.
On a point of order, Mr. President, sir.
Yes, Mr. Dawson.
The legislation for compulsory acquisition is legislation that is now quite old. It allows for when lands are needed for a public purpose, and that can be broadly defined, for notice to be given to the owners of the land, for government to take possession and to start the work. And it is not done punitively, because it does not preclude the right of the landowners and their attorneys to negotiate or to go to court and get what they consider to be the full commercial value of the land. So the fact that land was compulsorily acquired or notice given and that construction has started and compensation not been paid does not mean that it was used perniciously, that is, that the person is being prejudiced because negotiation is ongoing for the owner to get what they consider to be the full value of the land, and that is the process. So the honourable member is again imputing disreputable motives to government in the way that it is acting.
Thank you, Senator Thompson. Senator Warren, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I tuned out for a little bit. I don't know if I missed it when Senator Thompson said that the money was paid to the individual after the land was acquired.
Senator Warren, I advise you to stay in tune.
Yes.
Otherwise, you mislead yourself.
Yes, Mr. President. The point is, Mr. President, the land was compulsory acquired more than 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago. And up to this day, and we know that the building was demolished, and we know that some construction work has started on the property. Has the owner of the land, the previous owner of the land, been paid for that property? And Senator Thompson said for public purpose. This was the first situation where that piece of legislation was used to benefit a private entity, because the operation which is going on there is not, when in the past, and the records will show this, compulsory acquisition was reserved when you wanted a highway, a school, something for a public purpose, a project being done and executed by the government of the day. This particular matter is a totally different entity, and the person executing the project, I don't even know if the government has any interest in the project from a profit-making or equity standpoint. So it is a totally different use of the legislation. All of these are things that this government will at some point in time have to answer for. And I am saying to this government that there is nothing wrong with you taking Barbadians into your confidence and sharing with them the information which they requested. And if hundreds of Barbadians are opposed to the manner in which you're going about it, make some effort to appease those Barbadians. Because at the end of the day, you may tarnish what is really intended to be a good project and give it a bad name and a bad reputation in the minds of the people of Barbados. With those few words, sir, I would allow you all to continue.
Thank you very much, Senator Warren. And then the speakers, Senator Maladou.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not sure I can follow the fiery speech before me, but I would like to make a couple of comments on this, because it is in my wheelhouse as such, to do with real estate. The first I knew of this is probably in recent times. I guess it is something quite new that has come up, and I do appreciate that these things move quickly. And I am not opposed in any way at all to the idea of attracting an institution as substantial as the African Exim Bank to set up permanently in Barbados. I believe that that would be excellent for us, the amount of activity it will bring, etc. But had I had the opportunity to advise on this, I would have suggested that rather than vest the land in perpetuity, I would have done a 99-year or longer lease. Now, why would I have done that, sir? I think we are being very generous, and I think we should be generous for this. This African Exim Bank is going to come with their own capital, and they're going to build something. I'm sure it's going to be substantial. I have not seen the plans for it, but they're going to invest a substantial amount of money in this property. And this property has been derelict for a very long time. I can't even remember when it was last. Actually, I do remember because I actually had an operation on my foot there at one point in time. Yes. There was a doctor there operating in part of it that was burnt down. One of the buildings right on the road. Yes. Maybe if Dr. Maynard was here, he would tell us who it was. But it has not been productive in many, many years. So to see it become productive is an excellent thing. I agree with that. But to vest it at no compensation to the people of Barbados, I'm a little troubled with it. And I must say, I would have advised, as I said, that a lease would have made more sense. Now, since that decision has been made, I have a couple of questions, and I would like, if possible, the government side to help me with it. My first question will be, will land tax be due and payable on an annual basis on the completed property? Or will is this being exempted from land tax in perpetuity? Because we could say that if this, the African Exim Bank, 2.5 hectares in this location, I would imagine they're probably going to spend somewhere between, in Barbados dollars, $50 to $60 to $70 million to build a building there. That's the kind of footprint I would imagine. And if that is so, the current commercial tax rate, commercial properties, is just shy of 1%. You could see that we would be getting a substantial annual amount of money. I have not seen in any legislation, perhaps I'm wrong, that maybe that has been waived as well. I don't know. So that was my first question. Is it subject to land tax? The second question would be, and this is the problematic part of vesting it and not leasing it, is can the African Exim Bank treat with this property freely immediately? Because if you gave me a property and I have the title to it, I could sell it tomorrow because it's mine. On the other hand, from a lease point of view, there would be a time at which it would come back to me, and there would be, of course, ways I could deal with how you could transfer that lease, et cetera, et cetera. But once you vest this property and you pass all the rights, there's enough lawyers in here, of which I am not one, who will tell you that having vested it, they will be able to treat with it freely. So those would be my two questions. So let me be absolutely clear, Mr. President, through you. I support the initiative of attracting the African Exim Bank to set up its Caribbean headquarters in Barbados. That is an excellent idea. Well done. I do not support vesting it in perpetuity without clarity to the Barbadian people as to what the benefit might be for us. I think a lease would have been a better way of doing it. And since you're not doing a lease, how have you restricted the onward sale of this property to someone who we might not know for their own profit? Those are my questions, sir, but I support the overall idea. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Malado. Senator Thompson. Yeah, nobody's rose, so.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise in support of this resolution. I think that some interesting questions have been raised which warrant answering, but I believe that we have to keep our eyes on the wider relationship and what is important here. There is clear shifting in the geopolitical tectonic plates. It is evident by what we are seeing, the rhetoric and the decisions coming from the north. It has implications for quality of life, for the movement of capital, for the conduct of trade and business, and for interpersonal relationships, because a lot of us have relatives in the north, and the extent to which we can go, whether there will be visa opportunities or closed opportunities or not, has all now become relevant in the current global conversation and current in the conversation that is taking place across our region. With the shifting of these tectonic plates, what we are noticing is that relationships and behaviors at the international relations level that we have taken for granted have changed completely and are changing every day. One almost does not know what to expect on the news anymore. With that, it has now become incumbent on us. It is clear that our relationships and what we had come to expect by way of international relations behavior relative to issues such as climate change, we can no longer expect. It is clear that what we had come to expect as a friend in the North who would give support and aid on basis where developing countries and poorer countries could expect to get support for health services, youth development, educational build-out, and things that apply to our development trajectory are now and cannot now be expected. All of that has been withdrawn overnight, without notice, and without any thought of the implications for countries that would have been completely dependent. Perhaps Barbados was not one of them, or the Caribbean perhaps was not, except maybe for one country in the Caribbean. But certainly, there are global implications for the policy decisions being made by our northern neighbor. Therefore, and in fact, what we are also seeing is that the nature of the relationship is becoming far more transactional. We have heard the expression, what cards are you holding? Almost non-diplomatic language that you don't hear leaders with, but it is clear that it is a very transactional kind of relationship. What cards can you put on the table? What do you have to trump my ace? That means that the quid pro quo, the way in which we engage, whether we have value or not, or are perceived as having value, has become all the more important. In a game where you are regarded as a minnow, where you do not self-define, but where those with power determine how you are to be treated and to what you are entitled, if anything at all, and use the weight of their foot to stamp on the metaphorical knee, to put their metaphorical knee on your neck, your socio-economic or environmental neck, or your development trajectory neck, you can be in very serious trouble. I think it was Senator Nichols who may have said earlier that really when you look at what is happening across the globe, we are living in an era where geopolitics as we understood it, where the power dynamics as we believe them to be, where who was powerful and who is not, is changing completely. Whether people will walk softly and carry a big stick, or walk loudly and beat you with the big stick that they're carrying, has now become a question that those of us who are students of international relations are watching. Where threat may previously have been a last resort, where negotiation was the first step. All of that is now out the window. These are the politics of raw power without apology. In that environment, Small island developing states must determine who their friends are going to be and what relationships they are going to have and what collaborations and levels of cooperation they will pursue so that together they will have greater presence, greater weight, greater protection, and greater power in the new marketplace, or this redefined socio-political and socio-economic environment. It is in this context that the government of Barbados has decided to throw its doors open to the Afrexim Bank, and to create an opportunity here for them to do business, for Barbados to be its hub. It has relationships with 15 countries, I believe, in CARICOM, the 15 member states, but the hub, the base, will be here in Barbados. It is in the context of a new global environment and climate where funding is going to be far more scarce and access to resources, because private capital will sometimes follow the direction or the hints or the persuasion of the government. So if government is posturing in a particular way, private capital will take its hint from government. And therefore, there may be less capital available investing southward, or lending southward, or being available to countries in the south. It is therefore critical, and it is no accident, that you are seeing the build out of the banks from the global south, the Development Bank of China, the Development Bank of Brazil, the BRICS Bank, the Development Bank of Africa. These are not accidents. And the point that I was making is that the world is actually standing on the precipice of a tectonic shift. And that is going to have very serious implications. And in that atmosphere, we must be able to turn to new friends, to look for new access to capital, to have new relationships, and to say we are friends of all and satellites of none, because we are pursuing the national strategic interests above all else. It is critical, therefore, that we continue to support our relationship with the Afrexim Bank. And I note, I found quite interesting, that all kinds of concessions are given to hotel properties. To cost you less, I'm told. To all kinds of entities and organizations coming to Barbados. They are given free passage. They are given all kinds of tax incentives and tax write-offs. There are some that will never pay tax in my lifetime, thanks to the Democratic Labour Party. And it is amazing that they are calling for transparency, a government that was known by its mantra to punish people with silence. But now they feel that we have to be transparent, and everything that they are discussing is being discussed because we have it out in the public domain. It is not a secret. And therefore, in building this relationship, we have to consider that people with a common historical root may very well have a shared and common future, and must build that shared and common future together. Contrary to what some may believe, Mr. President, I'm really very much pro this relationship with Africa. It was my honor to negotiate the visit of the President of Kenya, which started this new Africa-Caribbean relationship. When I was ambassador to the UN, and it started because I knew somebody who was high placed in the Kenyan government. I got a twig that the president was planning to come to the Caribbean. Barbados was not on his schedule. And I was able to intervene immediately, negotiate, and then call the Prime Minister and say, I've just done this. What is your reaction? And she said, Thompson, just no, but if you know that you have the confidence of your Prime Minister, and if you know that you have the experience and skill to see where something can lead, and that initial conversation created what would become the relationship with the rest of CARICOM, the conversation about new trade and business, and in fact, the possibility for air and other links. These conversations are important. It was also my honor to co-chair the CARICOM committee for the establishment of the African-Caribbean relationship at the UN, a new grouping, AFCAR. It hasn't done particularly well because COVID intervened, and many of those of us who were the ambassadors leading the charge at that time left the UN, but it certainly has scope for bringing new dynamics into the UN negotiating space because of the number of countries in CARICOM and in Africa. And if we could hold together as a cohesive unit, then we can exert tremendous influence on that space and on the multilateral space. I believe, sir, in giving young people exposure. Just a little personal, sir. And at the time, when my niece turned 21, I wanted her to see a civilization that was much older than the West, and to understand that there is more to life than New York and London. And I took her to China. And when my nephew turned 21, I took him to Africa. I took him to Kenya. And I think that our young people have to have a sense of history. They have to have a sense of self. They have to understand who they are. They have to understand that there are Black brothers and sisters in Africa from whom we were separated, and that there are those who have an interest in never letting us understand what we have contributed as Black people to global civilization, because they want us always to look in the mirror and see nothingness, because that is how they define us. So this is important to me. It is important to me because when the tectonic plates continue to shift, sir, it is going to be critical that we have alliances, relationships, collaborations, and things in place to immediately pivot for new support and new ways of doing business. Trade is going to become more important. There are more people living in Africa than there are in the United States. Barbados is geographically positioned. I remember, Barbados is geographically positioned in such a way that when you come across the Atlantic, Barbados is your first land call. It is therefore strategically well placed for aviation opportunities across the globe. It is well placed for shipping and trading opportunities across the globe. It is well placed to move tourists from particular locations across the Atlantic and across the Pacific. These are opportunities that are going to increasingly become available to us in this new global atmosphere. So, and we have to keep watching and listening to see what is happening, and when we are to take the opportunity that is available. I found it fascinating, sir, And I was making the point earlier about some of the concessions and incentives and so on given to other organizations and entities that I have never before heard complaint about any organization, particularly those coming from certain parts of the world. But the instant you are seeking to support an African originating bank, all of a sudden they cannot be trusted with piece of land. We shouldn't give them anything. Are you getting anything out of it? Nobody has ever questioned before. What are the relationships and what are the benefits to be derived from having a UN house or any of the other organizations or entities that have built on Barbadian land or that have been given concessions and incentives? Barbados will be the hub, and when this major geopolitical shift takes place, Barbados is going to be the hub of a major development bank right here in this small country. Monies are going to transit the economy because of it. Whether they build a trade center or a hotel, there will be jobs resulting from it. And let me pause to treat to this issue of Barbadians getting construction jobs. Barbadians are getting so many construction jobs that we had to establish the construction gateway to train and retrain and beg people to come into construction, to do rapid training in order to have them equipped for the jobs available. Because I know that the Dems would not understand what it is to have 9 hotels building at the same time, because not even one hotel was built in the 10 years that they were in office. Not one. But now we have 9 under construction simultaneously. So the problem is not whether Bajans will get jobs. The problem is finding enough Bajans to give all of the jobs to. And it isn't only because you cannot find tradespeople. And when you find tradespeople, and I can tell you that, sir, because I'm attempting to put up a house. When you find tradespeople, they are demanding top dollar. And they will take 3 jobs at the same time. They're coming at you today, they're going at me tomorrow, and next week they buy some, and the following there at somebody else. And you can't quarrel, you have to wait patiently. You cannot even get a gardener to come by you anymore. That is why unemployment is so low in Barbados. But it isn't only that there will be jobs in construction. Part of what is being done, and I'm going to make 2 points. One is that what the activity in the economy is not only generating blue-collar jobs, it is generating jobs for all our graduates. It is generating jobs at every level. The people are not bringing a full plane loads of staff to work in the train center or the hotel. Barbadians will be managers in management positions. Barbadians will be handling IT. Barbadians are going to be doing front and back office. Barbadians will be hosts and chefs. If it is trade, interpreters, Barbadians will be getting this job. And the question is going to be whether we are training a sufficiently multi-skilled labor force to get all the jobs. If we are talking about the Africa Bank, I'm just going to, I keep getting tongue-tied with it, sir. Afrexim, the Zim Bank, sir. If we're going to be talking about the Zim Bank, I need to make another point, and it is this. We are in a position where, because of the relationship now with Rwanda, we are going to be producing pharmaceuticals here in Barbados. And the pharmaceutical industry is a huge industry and a huge profit-making industry. It means that all kinds of students from UWI who are trained in a range of sciences will now be getting jobs in these fields, that Barbados will become a research center for diseases and for vaccine production and so on. You know, sir, that we were extremely disadvantaged in the marketplace to be in the early days before the Prime Minister went out and engaged in the strongest way because the competition and the prices for COVID vaccines were so high, and because the developed countries where the drugs were being manufactured in large part were hoarding for their own populations. You could not get access. Barbados was able to get access early because of the work of Prime Minister Motley, and then was able to share with other Caribbean countries. And later on, Guyana, I think, also did a reciprocal arrangement in sharing with us. So when you talk about this new bank, that is the kind of activity that they are going to help to support and be engaged in. And really, in building out our relationship with Africa, and it is, why build it out? Build it out because you're talking about a large marketplace. Build it out because you are talking about people with whom you share a common history. Build it out because when you walk down cities in Africa, you could almost see people who look like your brother or sister or an aunt or uncle. Such is the biological and other closeness. Build it out because it makes good strategic sense given what is happening in the world. There cannot be the sort of bipolar world that we have now. With North and South, there has to be a more multipolar world. And in addition to that, not only are new countries going to rise and take places of precedence, new voices from the South are going to emerge and are already emerging. And Barbadians should be proud that Mayor Motley's voice is one of the voices from the South that has tremendous global weight at this time. And that kind, voices that are speaking with moral authority, voices that are speaking with intellectual depth, voices that are speaking with a level of innovation and creation. But more important, and this is what makes Mayor Motley so popular at the global level, voices that are speaking with a level of empathy and humanity for this common person, for the suffering of people, for the dignity of people. Those are the voices that are going to be the voices of the present and the voices of the future, not the ones that say deport them and let us not look back. Not the ones that, and I'm going to make the point here, sir, that part, yes, if you come from an ever so welcome way for call, philosophy and tradition, then you will not understand that open borders are going to be part of the definition of the future, despite the right-wing governments that are rising across the globe at the moment. And we are going to have to make determinations about how we grow our population, what kind of skills we are going to have and invest in, and what is the nature of the relationships that is going to carry us forward. We are already seeing, sir, the withdrawal from important treaties and important multilateral organizations. But that does not mean that the rest of the globe is not going to form its own cohesive body to fight against, for every action there is a counter reaction. And therefore what we are going to see is a rethinking and a new approach at the multilateral level to how we deal with issues of power, to how we deal with issues of trade, to the nature of the alliances with which you would want to be part. Certainly, self-help is going to be of greater importance, and generating business on our own will take on new levels of significance. And that is why we are creating a welcoming environment for this bank. Really, that is what this is about. It is about creating a welcome environment for a bank in a global situation that is changing rapidly around us, when we have to think of what our relationships are going to be. It is part, sir, of our resilience building. You see, it is all right for some people to say that 31 weeks of import cover is way too much, lick it out. Spend it, get rid of it. But in a shifting international environment where you have no idea what is going to happen from one day to the next, where you've already dealt with freak storms, Elsa, Beryl, ashfall, and where anything else could happen at the environmental level, you must hold high reserves to protect your population and to cushion your country against the external or exogenous shocks that are coming at it. Mr. President, you've signaled to me that I'm out of time. But it is clear to me that this emerging relationship with Africa and the institutions of Africa is going to, as the harbinger for us of increased trade, improved shipping ties, improved aviation ties, and Barbados becoming a hub for activity across the countries of the South, as South-South cooperation becomes the platform on which we, as a new global South, as a global South under threat, construct our well-being for countries and populations. Mr. President, I'm much obliged.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Honor, Senator, the Most Honorable Daisy Elizabeth Thompson. Senator Walters.
Thank you, Mr. President. I promised it wouldn't be long. I did not plan to contribute to this resolution, but just to say a few words. I think sometimes, from my observations, I've seen many debates in this chamber where the members of the government have used it to showcase their oratory skills and to prove to each other that, or to prove to the Prime Minister who is better than who, and who is not better than who. Personally, I think that sometimes we just need to sit back and do an honest assessment of the situation. And I spoke yesterday, and of course, the majority of my speech was politically charged, but realistically, I don't believe that the government should vest the lands in the AfrExim Bank, African Export-Import Bank. And I think that a lot of Bajans are concerned. And it's not that they don't want the investment of the $300 million. I think it is really just a situation where I think they want the government to do what is in their best interest. And while it begs the question, while we chase investment, and I just use the word chase loosely, and we've seen it in different scenarios. We've seen it in concessions for hotels. We've seen it in especially renewable energy, which the government has pretty much messed up, I would say. But we've seen a lot of thrust for investment that is supposed to help Barbados and help Barbadians. And Bajans are concerned that they're not seeing that help. Mr. President. Right? So I think that the genuine question that Barbadians have from their hearts is, can we afford to give it away? Are we in a position now in this country that we are able to give away the lands of our forefathers, our lands? We are in a situation, we just finished appropriation bill debate, and we're down $1.1 billion in debt, and we've been down $1.4 billion in debt before that, and we went through COVID, we went through the freak storm. We hear these situations. We live it every day. We have seen the conditions of our hospital and the challenges that successive governments even have had to face to try to rectify these problems. We see the conditions of our schools, we see the conditions of our roads, we see the conditions of some of our neighbors. We know this kind of livelihoods that they have to endure. We talk about all of these everyday things. So why do we have in such a way to compensate large persons or large corporations with giving away our property? And I think that's where the consideration is for Barbados. It ends there, right? We talk about there's going to have a hotel on the plot, on the site of a hotel, a convention center, and the trade center. It is, and the business. But the reality is that while they support the hotel and the tourism industry, and it always be 1,500 workers in construction and 700 workers after construction. But do we realize sometimes that these workers are working for half a year? And then for the other half of the year, these workers are on national insurance or trying to hit a job here or cater here or go to a bar and get a part-time job here or there. So it is not that they're ungrateful. It's not that I am ungrateful that these opportunities, these investments do not bring employment opportunities, but we have to manage this. Because we speak here as though it is going to be oh so glorious and that we're going to see all of this employment that's going to benefit all of Barbados. People are going to be earning a 40-hour week for a real great wage. And this is what you see, Mr. President. The union has to be continually fighting for hotel workers, for basic things for hotel workers, a basic percentage of service charge, a basic pay, even as recent meals, Mr. President. So all is not well. All is not well, and this government must not behave as though all is well. They are here to act in the interests of Barbados, and it is fine to go on the world stage and have all these glorious speeches and be best friends with all the leaders. In the previous debate, I heard the Minister of Energy speak glowingly about all those persons who were here from all across the globe. But did she take them to Hope? I showed them that the PV systems, solar PV systems are not connected. Did she take them to the banks where all the money that investors have invested is locked out of the grid? Have she showed them the light bills that Barbadians are facing? And I'm not saying to poke at the senator. I'm saying that these are just realities. So while we go after the investment, while we want the bank to come here, while we welcome the $300 million, is it the right thing to do? Should we sell the land? Should we lease the land? But definitely we should not give away the land, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Walters. Senator Cummings, Senator Morris.
Mr. President, I've been sitting here and listening to this debate, and I've come to recognize that every time there is a developmental stance taken by the government, it seems as though it is rejected by a certain element in this country. I don't know how many people know this, but do you know, sir, that I think it was World War II, the British government made Barbados a hub. Barbados being a hub for things is nothing new. The British government made Barbados a hub, and it became such an issue with other countries that if you go to the office of the West India Council in Britain and you look at some of the ships' logs, you will see that some of the British professors, when they saw BRP in those logs, they interpret that to mean that Britain was using the hub from Brazil to the to someplace in Argentina. Okay? That is what they assume. Only to find out that it was Barbados, or the River Plate. BRP for them meant Barbados, Brazil to the River Plate. It didn't make sense because both of them are in South America. It was Barbados to the River Plate. And how do we know that? Oh, because the Germans were in Barbados. And there's some folklore about it that the Cornwallis get shoot from behind. The last time, I think some time ago, I spoke in here, and I said that with all that is going on in the world at this moment, that Barbados and other countries will have to start forming new blocks. I talk about the South to South, I talk about Africa, I even talk about China, and I talk about Asia, because of the uncertainty that is going on. Therefore, if Barbados positions itself as a financial hub, and note carefully, sir, this thing about Barbados being a financial hub in the Caribbean this is not the first thing that this is being talked about. This was talked about a long time ago when they said that Guyana would be the agricultural hub, Trinidad would be the industrial hub, and Barbados was supposed to be the financial hub. But what we have now is persons in Barbados who are claiming to be more Africans than the Africans themselves, but as soon as any relation with Africa is developed, they begin to question it. I didn't hear anybody question any other entities in Barbados. The last time we discussed something here, it was about, I don't remember which one it was, but something to do with Africa again. And somebody here, and they began to question its integrity, and the response came, what with the other banks that set up, did we question them? And the reason why we are asking these questions is for one reason and one reason only, that we can trust others, but there are others we cannot trust. And when you look at the variable, there's only one thing. And I'm not going to say what that one thing is, because if I say it is skin color, people will begin to say that I'm racist, and I'm not. Sir, the West Indies Cricket Board used to be in Barbados. And they left Barbados and went to someplace else. And since then, the whole West Indies cricket was in shambles. We are talking every time now, we tend to build something, it is about heritage, heritage, heritage. If we build something on a piece of land, do we take away its heritage? We want to sit down and do what? Look at the sea and laugh? When that same piece of land could be generating income? And why is it that only certain pieces of land that we talk about as heritage? I'm getting tired, sir, of this heritage thing. So leave Old Town. Leave, is it James Lane? Leave where it is, leave where it is. Let the old buildings stop there. Grow trees from between them. But that is our heritage. So what are we supposed to do? Just leave it there. At the same time, we don't give away everything. But those who do not give away, the only thing they give away is use concessions that even are greater than, is even greater than Western land, sir. And what happens? Barbarians are being left behind. Is that what you want? And you're talking about every time something develops in here, the other issue is give Barbadians a job. That Barbadians construction. Well, somebody dealt with that already. And it seems as though that some of us are not doing our homework on these things. History will show that land is always used for its greater profit. all this talk, sir, the slave system in the Caribbean was abolished because it became unprofitable for England too. That's why it was abolished. That they use it when it was generating the greatest profit for them. But every time I look around, sir, we are coming with heritage and taking up this thing and the next thing and the third thing. And that day, the last thing, you know, there was some talk where we were giving away Barbados. We talk about the land just up the road there, Lower Bay Street. But we also have to ask ourselves about the value of this land and government acquiring land. Because if I am a government, and I know a piece of land is valued at one thing, and I even try to give you more, and you then try to up the value because you're, I think that's dishonest. I think so. And so, Mr. President, I want to give my full support behind this bill, this legislation, because, resolution, sorry, because in my view, it will benefit Barbados tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morris. Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I commit to attempting to take back the questions that have been raised by the honourable senators to the officers and the colleagues responsible for land investing, and to be in a position at some point in the future, I hope, to give some responses to the questions that you have raised. And with these very few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. No. Methinks the ayes have it. This resolution is therefore no passed. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of government's business, not just for the day, but for the end of 3 days. And I want to thank all of the honourable members who have put in yeoman service over 3 days. I know it's been long days. It's been detailed work going through the estimates and being in a position to speak on matters concerning the people of Barbados. And I want to express appreciation to all honourable senators for their participation. And having come to the end of our estimates discussion and the passage of the resolution just now, Mr. President, I beg to move that the Senate be adjourned sine die.
The question is that the Honourable the Senate do now adjourn sine die. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Senate stands adjourned sine die.